Okay, let's kick off. It's exactly 3:30. Nothing like being punctual. So welcome everybody. There's already a few dozen people online, and more are joining as I'm talking. Thanks for joining us today. We're delighted to be able to present this webinar to you around an introduction to RPA. So if you're an RPA expert, this next hour and a half probably isn't going to be for you. However, if you don't know anything about RPA, or if you've just heard about RPA but don't really understand what it is, then this should be a great session for you. So with me today, I've got two of my wonderful colleagues joining me, and they are Cameron Young and Ben Hart. So I know it's a bit confusing. It's two Camerons and a Ben, but I'll just let them both introduce themselves. So Cam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Cameron Young. I started working with Lean Consulting when I graduated from university. That's been just over 2 years now, and I'm working as an automation developer.
Thanks, Cam. What did you study?
I studied mathematics. Everyone's worst nightmare.
Is maths? No, it's not. Maths is fun. Maths is fun.
For me and you, Cam, it's fun. Not for everyone.
I'm on a mission to make it fun for everybody. Right. Okay. Thanks, Cam. And with me also is Ben Hart.
Thanks, Cam. So I'm a management consultant. I've worked for Lean just shy of 2 years. I'm from the northeast of England. You might hear that accent, although it's reduced a lot over the years, being on calls so much. And I'm the father to two little girls who are my world. I'm saying that just in case this goes on YouTube and then my words are immortalized forever and they look at this from, they've got to mention.
Brilliant. I'm sure they already know. And I'm Cameron Turner. I'm the MD of Lean Consulting. I'm from the South. I'm from very South, actually, originally from Australia, if you might hear on my accent, although I have lived here in the UK for 14 years. So I can hear that my accent has changed. So now I'm kind of in no man's land, and I get picked on when I go back home to Australia for sounding incredibly English, and I get picked on by English people for sounding fairly Australian. So I hope you can understand me. I have been doing lean and improvements for the best part of 16 years now. And I've been working with RPA since, for about 5 years now. I think 2015 was our first deployment. And we've done loads since. It's a great bit of software, and I'm really keen to talk to you more about what it can do and what it can't do, and where you should use it and why. So let's kick off. What is RPA? Ben, what's RPA?
Good question. So RPA is software programming that will run a set of activities that are predefined. So imagine when the washing machine was invented, you have a preset defined of services that are being run. Wash it at 90 minutes for this amount of time, then do this, then do this. It's kind of like that, but just in terms of the service industry, it's automation of that part of the process.
But using your analogy, you can configure your own washing programs, if you like. You can say, I want it to be this temperature, and I want it to run for this long, and I want it to add this kind of soap. You're in control of the automations or the preset programs that run on the washing machine, right?
Exactly right. Imagine you could hack into it and then change the temperature, the time, and all those other parameters. Yeah.
Cam, do you think, Dad?
No, I think that hits it on the nail on the head. In terms of in the business world, all those repetitive tasks that people do normally, like administration tasks, something that they do like week in, week out, RPA is able to just replicate that, and it does it in the same way that a human would. So it would click this button, type this here. It's not in the traditional code sense of like hitting the back end.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I like to explain it a bit like this, which is that robotic process automation allows you to process things on a system the same way a person would without the person. It's not really much more complicated than that. It's allowing you to replicate what steps a person takes. And I guess the really key thing about robotic process automation is it uses the user interface layer of an application. And if that's a bit jargony, then it uses the bit we use, because that's just the bit of software that we see. Behind that front end, where we're keying things in and pressing buttons and playing with the software, behind that sits database tables and reams and reams of code that makes all that work. And I guess automation is not a new concept. Automation has been around since we've had computers. In fact, that's what computers' job is to do, is to automate and digitize things that we would otherwise be doing manually. And we've been able to automate stuff for a long time, but traditionally, the way that you automate things is through code. You open up the code layer of the software that you're trying to automate, or multiple bits of software, and you code what it is you want to happen. Now, the thing about code is that one line of code, it's a bit like a house of cards. One line of code can knock over an entire application. And for that reason, you'll see huge amounts of testing and regression testing and all sorts of things go on when someone is updating software. You must have experienced software being updated at your workplace, only to find that the next day that they've regressed back to the old version because there's bugs had come up, or things didn't happen the way they wanted to, or there was some unintended consequences. And as a result of all of this complexity, comes cost. So the reason why more things aren't automated in business is not because we can't do it. Actually, so much of what you'd want to automate is possible, almost all of it. The problem is that the cost benefit of it doesn't stack up. You wouldn't spend £1 million to automate a process that only costs you £100,000 to operate. Because your return on investment is like 10 years. You might even not be using that software in 10 years' time. So no financial director is going to green like that. And this is where robotic process automation really earns its stripes, because it can do things faster and easier. It doesn't touch the code layer of your applications. It just touches that user interface layer, that the same way a person keys things in. So that's a little bit about what RPA is. I want to talk now about who provides this, because we've talked about RPA software, but what does that really mean? And Gartner and Forrester, they both put out every quarter they put out a magic quadrant, I think is Gartner's term for it, where they look at who the main players are in the industry, and then they rank them against these kind of different criteria, so that their ability to execute versus how good their vision, completeness of their vision is. And then they kind of chart it out against this challengers, leaders, niche players, and visionaries. And you can see here that we've got UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism, I'm just circling the three of them now, are clear leaders in the RPA field. And in our experience, almost all of our, in fact, pretty much all of our clients use one of those three applications. And if I go wider than just our client base and I talk to other people, they're using one of these three applications. Blue Prism is a UK-based company, so they're a UK platform. I think they've been around for, I want to say 10 years now, but hopefully you won't get an angry email from Blue Prism saying that's wrong. It's roughly about that amount of time. Automation Anywhere is an American company, and they've been around a bit longer. And UiPath is, I think they're based in Romania, and they're one of the more recent entries into the market. They came in about 4 or 5 years ago, and have gone from strength to strength. So that's the three main players in the RPA space as of the moment. You've got some other niche players over here, like Nice Systems and Kofax. So Nice are big players in the call center space. So they do a lot of things like call recording software, or call delivery software. cloud software, workforce planning software, a whole bunch of call center centric applications. If you've ever worked in a call center, you've probably heard of NICE. That's how prevalent they are, and I think they've tried to capitalize on that fairly large user base and niche brand recognition in the contact center space to sort of talk about an assisted robot that can help your contact center agents while they're doing their work. So they get a bit of traction there because they've got a good user base to market to. But again, most people are using these three applications. Same goes for people like SAP and Kofax. Kofax are a big they do a lot of scanning stuff. And again, they're trying to leverage that.
I think just from this report from Gartner, what you're referencing here, Microsoft, they bought Softomotive in May this year, I think, and you can see a lot of that technology coming through in their 365 suite now.
They've got something already, don't they? What's their application in 365?
Power Automate.
Power Automate, yeah. But
it's coming through on a lot of different streams. But I think Microsoft are going to kind of win this race, well, mainly because they're Microsoft, but also because they already have all the applications, the user base is there, and some of the stuff they've produced already is just so user friendly. It's like UiPath, but just anyone can use it, right? Even like me, who's not a developer in any sense.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Microsoft are the challenger to watch for sure. I mean, they've got of all of the companies on here, they've got the biggest user base by a long way. They are a massive, massive company. Everyone is familiar with Office and Windows. And like you said, they've integrated it quite well. I think we'll see more releases from Microsoft over the next 12 to 18 months as they mature their offering and it can do more and more things. I think the key thing is that it's going to be linked very, very well to their suite of products, and simplicity to use is going to be really key as well. So I think you're right. I think we'll start to see a lot more users using Microsoft as their RPA solution in the future, although we haven't seen too much of it now. Interestingly, we've used Power Automate, haven't we, for some of our work, for lean consulting work?
Yeah, that's right. So we have a green belt course, and we simulate a warehouse in there, and we have Power Automate running in there to simulate the flow of product through a warehouse,
and orders being made online and then working its way through the process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. So now that we've talked a little bit about the providers, Cam, tell us a little bit about which you prefer using. I mean, you are actually trained in all three of those main applications there: UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism. So what's your preference? Which one do you prefer to use if you had a choice?
So personally, I would use UiPath. It was the first platform that I knew how to use or learned how to use, but it's definitely kept up its top rankings in my book.
Why is that?
Automation Anywhere is very traditional in the way that it looks and how you need to develop on it. It looks like what you see in the movies, like lines and lines of code, and it's not very user-friendly. You have to do every single little step that you need to do. Whereas both UiPath and Blue Prism have like ready-made activities that you can use. So instead of putting in the hard code to like open up Excel application with this file, it just has a box you pull in and you just put in the like file path to the file that you want to open. And so it's much easier in that sense. To be honest, UiPath and Blue Prism are on the same wavelength. UiPath is just slightly more modern looking and slightly more user friendly in my opinion.
And what about the support that you get from the community?
So I found that UiPath is probably the best in that respect as well. They have a really, really big online community. I think part of that is because they offer free online training. I think Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere now do offer a little bit of free training as well. But UiPath definitely started that, and they probably have the most extensive library of training immediate release.
Okay, cool. Ben, do you have any views? A bit more of an outsider view of these applications? You're on mute.
Classic faux pas. Yeah, I do. I guess generally we're kind of constrained with the client. Most of the time they'll have a commercial agreement in place, so it's a tough sell to say change to this provider. I lean towards Automation Anywhere. One, because I've used it the longest, and I'm better explaining the commercial side of things. But the other is I find more clients are engaged with it where they don't have it because the pricing structure is so simple. So it's easier for me to explain it to someone that maybe doesn't have it or isn't as far in that journey.
Okay, cool. Yeah, for mine, I mean, I've used all three now as well. So I think that Automation Anywhere is got a far bigger presence stateside, and that's probably no surprise since it's a US company. And being one of the first out the gates with this type of software, I think they leverage that quite well to get the mass quite a rapid user base. Blue Prism took a organization-led approach, and by that I mean they went out there and tried to hook lots of big organizations into their software because it's a bit like once you start using it, like you referenced before, Cam or Ben, you're not going to change halfway through. You've got 10 automations on here. There's no easy way to just switch over to another one. You have to redo all that work in another platform if you were to switch. So I think Blue Prism were trying to get as many big organizations as they could and create that kind of that large user base that way. UiPath took a bit of a different tact, actually. They took a user-led or an individual-led approach. So they did something really clever, which is they gave the software for free. There was like a community edition that you could get, and so you could just have a play with it really easily. A community license, if you weren't using it for commercial purposes, you could just use it for free forever. And they also put all their training online, really well conceived training, really easy to digest, and they made that free for everybody. And they have a bunch of different courses. And then the other cool thing they did was they created a really, really good forum. So if you have a question, if you're struggling to do something or something is just not working, if you go onto UiPath's forum, you can get an answer like that. I think Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere have done made some strides to catch up to that approach. UiPath definitely took an individual approach and said, you know what, let's build a community of users, and then the business will come. I think it's been really successful for them, and it's been interesting to watch UiPath and Blue Prism face off because from an application point of view, they're very, very similar. But it was really their different business models and their different approaches to things that drove their success. Thanks for that, guys. So is RPA, Ben, is RPA and AI the same thing?
No, they're not. They're often confused, though. And I suppose RPA was like a prequel to AI, a stepping stone towards it. Imagine if you had two colleagues who worked in an office. Colleague A just says, "This is the process. This is the way we do it. We always do it this way. We can't deviate from this process." And this guy just does it, or lady just does it the same every time. But then you've maybe got someone else in the office who is quite free thinking and is able to make decisions and maybe doesn't follow the linear process. And when something happens that they weren't expecting, they'll make a decision there in the moment. That's kind of the difference. So RPA won't make any decisions. And if something happens that isn't predefined, it'll just stop. Where AI wouldn't. It can learn to adapt and to move with whatever problems it's thrown at it. Sometimes not to great effect, but that is there, right? Cam Young, would you agree with that?
Yeah, so RPA is exactly what you said. It is very rigid. If you expect it to do something like even the slightest bit outside of that process that you've defined for it, it's going to fail. Whereas as AI is, I guess, the decision maker, it gets given a situation and it's able to decide what to do next based off of all past experience. RPA is just going to do exactly what you've always told it to do.
Yeah, I mean, I hear RPA spoken in the same breath as AI. So as I go and speak to different organizations, they talk about, what's our plan for RPA and AI, as if that's kind of some interchangeable or amorphous thing. And in this fourth industrial revolution that we're in, which is automation and digital, the two get conflated quite a lot. But really, they are very different. So there's nothing about RPA that is artificial intelligence. And like you guys both said, you have to tell RPA everything. It's completely stupid. Like, it is dumb software. It's so stupid that, like, even in the middle of your process, if there's a pop-up box that appears and it says something like, your record has been saved, press OK to continue, and there's a little OK button, you don't have to train a person to press that OK button. We all know that you just need to clear that message down, and the application will kick on. But if you haven't told the bot to expect that box and then to click OK, it won't do it, and it will just stop. It will just stop and look at it. And I don't know, because it's a moron. Let's not sugarcoat it. RPA is completely stupid. Cool. So we've got a little screenshot here of one of the applications. I think we've used UiPath. So the three applications look quite different. So as Cam said, Automation Anywhere is lines of code. So it's just like a blank canvas that with row numbers, and you write a line of code one after another as a set of instructions. Blue Prism looks a lot like Visio. So it's got that kind of grid canvas, and you drag shapes onto it that are almost exactly the same as Visio shapes. But instead of a square box, instead of that just representing a process step, when you click on it, you can actually tell it what you want that step to do. So it's like a process map, but that does stuff. That's probably the best way to explain Blue Prism. UiPath, slightly different. It has kind of these vertical containers, and that's what we're looking at here. So Cam, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're seeing on screen?
Yeah, sure. So if we look at the kind of big middle portion of the screen, you can see at the very top we have Open Browser, and that's an example of one of the activities you can just drag in, and then the only input you have to put in is the URL.
Right. So you've got that from here. I'm sort of circling it here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And on that left-hand side, there's hundreds, probably even thousands of activities you can get to just put in easily. And then, like, further down the page, you've got for each row, so that's working with like a data table that you could get from either a web page or Excel or CSV. Like there's tons of different stuff that you can do with it, and like the end result is you just drag in this box and it's there, easy for you to use.
So it's like nested containers is the kind of thing. So this is like the first step here is Open Browser, and then after that's happened, you want it to do something, and what you want it to do is that for each row, and then you want it to navigate here and then get some information and then put that information somewhere. That's kind of it's those instructions. But instead of having to code each of these, you're just kind of going, you're just dragging and dropping Open Browser and do, or okay, cool.
Yeah. And then on the bottom right hand side is kind of a bit of a technical example, but it's how we would select like different buttons and input boxes on a website.
So this window here that you've got open is actually the detail that sits inside this get text activity, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so what's going on here then?
So where it says like web control, and then it has a few different attributes, the box below your mouse.
Yeah.
The activity on the left get text is asking I guess the software UiPath to go to that specific location in the website, which is specified by those attributes, and get the text that sits there.
because everything on a web page or even on a bit of software application, all those fields of information, they're all named, aren't they? They're all called something.
Everything has a naming convention.
Yeah. So and you don't have to tell it. It kind of sees what all the names are, and then it says which bit do you want, and you can even point on the screen, can't you? I want that bit there.
Yeah. Although it's worth noting that feature, if you like, where it gives you all the information and then you just select what you want, is I believe only available for UiPath and Blue Prism.
Okay.
Don't think automation quite has that feature.
So you'd have to, if you were doing it on a web page in automation anyway, you'd have to like look at the source of the web page and go, well, that element's called. I mean, you can do that on Google. You can click view source when you're highlighting an element, and it will tell you what that name's called. So you can find out. It's not that hard.
No.
Okay, cool. So what makes a good candidate for automation?
So I guess something that's repeated a lot, and it's always repeated in the same way. I have to be very specific about repeated in the same way because often that's overlooked. You get told that the process is this, then this, then this. But actually, at the second stage, if the person's actually married, then maybe it goes down some other route in the process. So you really have to do your research on the process to make sure that it does fit.
So something with a huge amount of variation where, it's one process, but there's 100 different flavors of that process.
Yeah.
That's less ideal. Unless, of course, the main two flavors make up like 90% of the volume, and the other kind of 98 different variations are that long tail and rarely happen. You could automate those main kind of versions and then just hand those off to a person to do, because otherwise it takes forever to automate them. Okay.
Yeah, Cam, with that one as well. I mean that's often the biggest downfall when discussing RPA with clients, because they often have this fallacy that there isn't variation in their process, and they say, "Oh, this is it's how it's done every time." And then when you do a few observations, that it takes slight deviations every time, and you kind of get down to that. Oh, this only happens in joint cases, and that's 20% of the workflow, and it's an entirely different. Often people underestimate variation, and they often, because they've got humans doing it, think it's just the same every time. But there's always little nuances. So be careful, right?
I learned that lesson the worst possible way to learn that lesson, which is by doing it. So my very, very first RPA automation, I sat with people. I did the observations. I observed loads of this process, and I mapped it out really, really clearly, like really granularly. So like, click here, press this, do that, open this, click that. I had it all scoped really clearly, and I was like, this is great. I'm doing a great job. Well done me. And the developers then built it, and it worked. They built it really quick too, and it worked. And I'm like, this is just amazing. And then we did a soft launch where we started to put some volume through it, and it fell over almost immediately. So it ran the first one and the second one, and then the third one it went nah. And I'm kind of like, well, hang on, what happened here? And the people that I was working with, they're like, oh, well, that's a joint account. Yeah, that's different. Yeah. You need to do something different when that happens. And I'm like, oh, right. Well, how often does that happen? Oh, yeah, quite a lot. And so I mapped that out. I'm like, okay, joint accounts. And is there any other kind of things I need to watch out for? No, you're fine. And so we released it again after a few weeks. And again, after about like the 6th or 7th one, it fell over again. It's like, oh yeah, they have children. Yeah, you got to do something different when they've got children. I was like, oh my God. So actually, one of the things I've learned is that you really have to work hard to tease out the variation from people, because even people who operate the process, it's just not front of mind. They think, well, yeah, no, this is what the process looks like. And they might come up with, oh, except if it's one of these, then you've got to do that. But what they're not great at is understanding all the variation. When it happens, they just do it almost like on autopilot. But it's rarely documented. So if you even go into an organization that has process maps, just kind of like the main happy path is what's documented, with maybe, one or two variations. But if there's 12 variations in that process, I've yet to see a company that has that well documented. So there is a real art to asking the right questions right up front to get the most information out that you can. And that's going to make your development cycle much shorter. And this is the lesson that I learned. What should have taken about 4 weeks to deliver took about 4 months, because the amount of rework we had to do to re-engineer each different version of this process was huge. Whereas if we'd have known about all that variation at the outset, we would have built that into it in a much faster and seamless way. So we had to redo a lot of things differently and put a lot of extra decisions in. But yeah, nothing like learning on the job, right? Okay, cool. So why don't we do an actual demonstration then, rather than just talking about it? I'd like you to see how easy this can actually be. So I've asked Cam here, because he's a bit of an expert. I've asked Cam to develop something right in front of us from scratch, but something simple, obviously. So it's not going to take days. It'll be quite a long webinar. Probably only take about 5 or 10 minutes. But Cam, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. So can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
Cool.
So we've got a blank canvas here. Have you, Cam?
Yeah, blank canvas.
And this is UiPath.
Yeah, UiPath.
And what are we looking at here? What's this?
So this is just like a view of a portfolio, someone's stocks, someone quite wealthy.
You've invested well there, Cam.
Yeah, this is not my personal holdings. It'd be great if it was.
So we've got a list of stocks here. We've got how much we have of them, and then we just need to fill in the current price today.
Okay.
And then we can work out the value.
Okay, so now we've only got 10 stocks on here, because when we're going to run it later on, we want it to run quite quickly. But you could have 1,000 stocks on here, and this process will just go and get all that data. Okay, cool. So so this is that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fill in the current stock price so that we can know what our stock holdings are worth. So that's the process that we're trying to automate here. All right, so you've got your blank canvas open. What are you going to do now?
So first we need to open Excel.
So you've just searched in that box on the top left for Excel, and it's come up with like all of the pre-built automations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you're saying open Excel. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
And you're telling it the name of the file you want to open.
Yeah.
Cool.
We want to read the table number.
Okay, so now the action is a do action, and the sub action there is read range, and you're telling it the range of the data and the name of the sheet. So that's that data we saw before, and then over on the right here, you're calling that something, can't you? So you can reference it later on.
Yeah.
And you could call that fried eggs and bacon if you like. It doesn't, DT stocks is just something that makes sense to you because it's kind of logical, but it's not code. It does. DT stocks has no meaning. It's just a name you've given it so that you can use that name later on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I've seen you just bring another thing across here. You've said you want to open a browser now. So you're inputting the URL that you want it to go to when it opens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So I see what you're saying. So for each row here, and then you're using that name that you just called, DT stocks. So for each row in that DT stocks table, you want it to do something.
Yeah. So we want it to go to a specific URL.
Yeah.
I have worked with this website before, so I know that every stock that you go to actually has a very generalized URL.
Okay.
So it's just marketwatch.com/stock.
/ the name of the stock or the 4-digit stock code.
Yeah.
And you had the 4-digit stock codes in your spreadsheet. So you're going to tell it now to go to this URL, marketwatch.com /investing /stock / whatever it is called on my spreadsheet on each row.
Yeah. So okay. It's in the stock column.
Cool. So now we've told it to open the browser. We've told it where the reference data is in Excel. We've told what we want it to do, where to go, actually. We've told it where to go. Open a specific web page for that stock. And now we're going to tell it what to do when it's there, right?
Yes.
And this is that indicate element bit you were talking about before, where you can point on the screen and it will just figure out what you mean. Yeah. So you're pointing to the price, obviously, because that's what we want. Okay, so these are all the bits that it's kind of identified, all the tags and all of the HTML bits that it's found, and you found the one you want. It's called BG-quote, right?
It's a combination of BG-quote and also the class being value.
Okay.
Because there could be several things with the tag BG-quote.
Okay. So now you've told it to copy that information, and now you've got to tell it what to do with it?
Yeah. So we're just putting it back into the table.
Into the Excel file where your stocks were, in that column that was empty?
Yeah, although we're not putting it back into the Excel, we're putting it in the table that's like internally stored within UiPath.
Right, okay.
Do that for every stock, and then at the end we just close it.
So that it's just kind of like three kind of high level steps that you've got there in the process, and each of those steps have a few more granular steps underneath them, right?
Yeah.
And now you're that information that you were holding, you're now writing to Excel, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's the kind of three main steps.
So if I run it now.
So is that done then?
Yeah, that's all done.
Cool. So, okay, so let's see it. So I just saw Excel flash up on your little taskbar. I think that was it opening and closing really quickly, wasn't it?
It does it very, very quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can actually do it, get it to do it in the background, so it doesn't, it happens even quicker in terms of like computing speed. So
we've just seen it navigate to AAPL, which is Apple, the first stock, and now we've seen it automatically. You're not secretly just pressing buttons behind here, Cam? No, the robot's controlling your computer.
Look, no hands.
And so it's gone to the second one on the list, which is Amazon, and it's now getting that. So interestingly, it's not going as fast as people might expect it to. And why is that?
I mean, it's still held back by all of the things that a human would be held back by. So it still has to wait for the page to load. So you can see here that each element of the page loads in its own time.
Okay.
So on the next one, the graph hasn't quite loaded yet, and the adverts on the right hasn't loaded. At the moment, it's programmed to just wait for the whole page to load, so it knows that value's there. You can tweak it to make it more efficient.
Okay.
So Cam, you built in that latency, right? So it knows it's not going to try and get it before the page is loaded. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's there automatically, but yeah, you have the ability to change it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've just got a couple more. So and this is the point about it using it copying what a person does. So if it was your job, Cam, to go and get stock prices and then fill out a really big spreadsheet, this is what you'd be doing. You'd be navigating to the stock page for each stock, and you'd be copying the value and pasting it in one at a time. So it's probably going faster than you would have gone, but it doesn't go at like super lightning speed because the kind of environmental constraints of web pages loading and systems opening up is the same constraint for the robot as it is the person.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So that's finished.
Yes.
So let's have a look at your spreadsheet.
Actually, I think it's still right.
Oh, it's doing the final updating of the spreadsheet. This is
people
you
have
now.
been asking people have asking questions in the Q&A. We'll answer them at the end if it hasn't been covered in the webinar.
I've already got it open. Right, there we go. So there are all the prices. So this is what the robot just filled in. This I'm pointing on the screen. You can't see. I'm not controlling. So column D here is what the robot has just got right now from the website. And so it's the current price of all these stocks. And then you've just got a formula sitting in column E, just timesing that by the quantity, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a really simple process, but you built that in what? Less than 10 minutes. In the real world, processes aren't as simple, 3 steps as this one is. They're usually more complicated. What are some of the other things that you have to watch out for, Cam, when you're building these sort of automations?
So the main thing is error handling. So if a human was doing, say this instead had an L there, so that stock name is now wrong. If I went to type that into the URL, that page wouldn't exist because that is not a stock. The human would know that and be able to see, okay, this is Google. Let me just search for Google. I'll find it that way. But actually, when it comes down to RPA, it doesn't know to do that, so you have to tell it to do something.
So we've told it to take the 4-digit or to take the value sitting in column A here and whack it onto the end of that URL, and that will take you to the page we want it to. So you're saying if this was a long spreadsheet of 1,000 stocks and someone had miskeyed it in its startup, then it would go to it would go to a page that doesn't exist, so that it wouldn't load. And because we talked about before about RPA being really stupid, it won't just go, oh well, it'll just stop working.
Yeah, it will wait for a minute or so to find the selector that we use to get this current price, and then it will just die basically.
Unless you tell it.
If we had a table of like 1,000 stocks, and this incorrect one was the very last one, it would go through all of the previous ones, get to this one, fall over, and then all that data that you've just collected is lost
because it just stopped. Yeah. So this is what you mean by error handling then. So what you want to do is you're trying to think about what could go wrong with this process. So the URL could be wrong. So if it says, cannot find page, you want to have a kind of, if that happens, then just write a note saying page not found. You might even want to put it in next to row F here and say unable to find page as an outcome, and then just move on to the next one so it knows just to keep going, but just sort of make a note of it. You also might want to put an error handler in for if the web page is just not working because maybe it's just not responding, or there's too much traffic on it, or maybe the website is down. So you want something to alert you to that. And again, write the outcome that didn't work.
Or you can get it to try again in a few minutes.
Okay. But again, you've got to tell it all these things.
Yeah.
And so all those error handlers, and if you've got a longer process with 50 steps in it, you might have 20 different error handling scenarios throughout the process. And often you put them in sort of after, don't you? Because it's kind of after you've built the process, you then look at where is it failing, or where could it fail. I guess you try and preempt some of these, don't you? Thinking, well, what in my experience, this might go wrong here, so I should put something in there to say this might go wrong, and if this happens, do this.
Yeah.
There must be also ones as you're testing your automation that you've built that you just didn't think of, and until you actually ran it, and then it stopped working. So you kind of went, right, we're going to have to put an error handler in there. Is that right?
Yeah. So a good example of that was actually in this automation. When I selected the selector to get the current price, you might have noticed that one of the tags is value, and I replaced the word positive with an asterisk. That's because I know that the current price there was positive, and if I check multiple pages, and another stock had gone negative that day, that tag would have actually changed to value negative, or if it was the same, it would have just been value. So by putting that asterisk as a wild card, I'm catering for all of those situations.
Okay, and because this is not your first time you've done this automation, so you know, so that it's like a cheat there. You've preempted, because you've done it before. You know that the name of the field can change, or the class of the value can change. So you were just preempting that and saying, I don't really care what it is, just give me the value that's there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, thanks for that. So where are some of the other areas that you can use automation? Ben, where have you used it before? What sort of things can you do with it?
I mean, you can use it anywhere. Whether you should or not is another thing. I guess some of the more beneficial use cases for this are around data conversion, reporting, communicating, so sending emails, stuff like that. Those are the best use cases, especially in current environment in service. There's this propensity to work from Excel. People love working from Excel because it's easy, right? And what happens is a service is built upon Excel sheets.
Test and trace.
Yeah. We won't go into that. So built upon Excel, and then the business realizes it's grown so much that it's not sustainable, and they can't just quickly deploy to a strategic solution. So they need something to kind of tie all this together. So I've done several projects where we've delivered data conversion to great effect.
Okay, cool. You mentioned email before, and so if I've got if I have, say, an email address for appointments, I don't know, say it's a hairdresser or something, and people can email asking for an appointment, or to change an appointment, or to cancel an appointment, could you automate that using RPA?
So the challenge is there's two types of data you can get, right? There's structured data and there's unstructured data. People who are emailing about appointments, the way I write, I might say I want it at 4:00. You might say I want it at about 4-ish, or you might write the word 4. You might write 1600. There's so many permutations of the way you can write a request like that. It's really hard for a robot to read and interpret that information. If you wanted to have that kind of functionality, what you would have is like more of a form. So it was kind of drop downs, and then the robot was knowing what was going to come in. A bit like when you make a complaint with a bank now, they've got a form that you fill in. It's like prescriptive inputs.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'd call that structured data then, instead of free form data. So an email is unstructured data, right? Because I can write, hi Cam, can I have an appointment on the 7th of November to cut my hair, which I probably should do at some point. So I can write that an infinite number of ways, really, can't I? I can say, have you got any appointments available for the 7th, or when's your next appointment available? Or, maybe I grew up in an army base, and I'd want it at 1600 hours. There's so many different variations of how I can write that. And I guess you could program RPA to do that, but you'd have to conceive of every possible scenario or variation of how someone might write something as simple as I want an appointment, and you'd have to have to then build automations for every single one of them, which obviously you would never do, right? So you have to think about, so often when we're looking at processes in a workplace that has unstructured data, so email, classic unstructured data. Another place is kind of like the memo fields where it's free text and you can write whatever you like a notes field on a CRM. You can go, customer was really rude and obnoxious and then hung up on me and swore at me and don't answer this customer again. That's free form text. It's really hard to kind of mine that. But if it's, name, address, date of birth, appointment date, appointment time, if it's in fields, that's very predictable and very structured, isn't it? So RPA can work really well with that. So if an email was an automated email because it was an online form and it comes through as an email and all the data on that form is always in the same format and always in the same place on the email, you could automate that though, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about some use cases then. Let me just share my screen again because I think we've got some we prepared earlier. Right. So admin tasks, data input or change of systems, customer contact, reporting. We've done quite a bit on reporting, haven't we? Data conversion, like you said, we've also done, and electronic communications. Let's have a look at some of these. What have we got here then? So this is quite a simple administrative task, wasn't it? Where so this is a real use case that we built for a client. So a client had something that they had to do in a really timely fashion on their system when a certain date happens, and they have to go through and check that everybody that was in this maturity check everyone is in the right state to receive their maturity. And it used to just take quite a bit of time to do, and there'd be critical time pressure. It had to be done within a certain window as well. So now the robot does that, and there's all these if statements here. So what we've got here is this rerun is just about rerunning it. If any of these fail, we re-queue it, so the robot knows it's going to have to run it again at some point in the future whenever we scheduled it. So that's all that is. Otherwise, it's like is the date, is it due yesterday? Yep, cool. Is everyone exercisable? Is everyone in the right status? Yep. Run the report, save it, job's done. Right. Everyone's not in the right status. Then there was some steps that we could take to get everyone in the right status. So if they were awaiting bonuses and it was a 5-year or 7-year bonus, there was some steps we could apply, and then we could check again if everyone's in the correct status. And if they were, then it would just complete. And if they were still not, then we'd hand it off to a person. We'd create a status report, send it to someone to say, you've got to fix something here. And then it would re-queue it so that later in the day when it runs again, I think this one ran 3 or 4 times a day. When it runs again, it knows it has to run it. And then it just goes through this sort of decision tree again and these steps, and then it just off and runs. So it's quite a simple use case, but it's an admin task that it was frustrating for people to do, and it had time sensitivities, and it had to be right. So it was quite an easy one to automate. Data input and change of systems. So this is where we were adding new records to a system. So it was data input. So this one here was just firstly checking if a customer record already exists, because maybe they were previously a customer or already are a customer or have an account of some sort. And if yes, then you were to update the record within their new address, details, and things like that. If not, create the new one. And then there's spouse and children and various steps to say. So this is the high level view. Obviously, the RPA process that we built had loads more steps, but as a high level, this is kind of what the bot did. So again, this is just this organization had people whose job it was. It had like several dozen people whose job it was just to sit there and key people in, because they had millions of customers each year, and they'd have hundreds of thousands of new people they'd have to register. And again, this was a fairly soul-destroying job, just sitting there, just keying stuff in. With the best will in the world, you're going to make mistakes, because that happens. And also, this was quite time bound. So they would get, they might get a file that had thousands of people that all needed to be input. And if it hadn't been input, if customer records hadn't been created, you actually had the situation where the customer was calling up to use the service, whatever this service was, and the customer service person going, "I'm sorry, I've got no record of you. You're not on here." And then that would cause a complaint, and it'd be frustrating. So there's lots of other issues that this solves because it does it so fast and it never makes a mistake. The only way that this could be wrong is if the data that the robot is given is wrong in the first place. So in this process here, if the customer's name was spelt incorrectly, that 100% cannot be because we spelt it wrong. It means that maybe the customer had a typo when they filled it in, when they sent it to us, or whoever sent us the data had the mistake in that customer's name, because a robot is now faithfully inputting whatever it was told to input. This is another customer contact one. This is actually a call center one, right? So customers would call up and ask for a statement to be sent out, and then at the end of the call, the agent would navigate to the documents. Sometimes the statement didn't exist, so there was a few steps they had to do to create the statement and to save it down and to draft an email, attach the statement to the email, and send it off. It wasn't a huge process, but it was a high volume one. And so now they just queue the request to the robot, and the bot just does it, and they can get back to doing what they're really there to do, which is not send statements, but it's to answer calls and help people with their inquiries. Actually, we've got a better one than this for reporting. Cam, do you want to tell us about a reporting one that you did?
Yeah, so there was a reporting automation that we did that basically pulled data in from 3 or 4 different systems that the business used, and through all different mediums as well. So some were through the web, some were through like a CSV file that their database had just kicked out as a report, like automated report. And then we collated all of that information and put it into a nice polished Excel file, which would then be used at like a weekly status meeting between like the account manager and the client. And that was a weekly report. So every week it was able to create like 300 plus reports, where previously one person would have to spend at least half an hour creating just one of them.
Just one of them. So yeah. There might be 100 different people creating these reports for their various clients, and they all look different.
Yeah, all look different. All had different metrics in it, and then we standardized all of it, so all of them get the exact same report. And we took all the best features from everyone's like different reports, put it all into one, and made it all polished with like brand colors, brand logos, and everything.
That was one of your first ones, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was my first one, my debut.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so reporting. I mean, we've got a number of use cases on reporting, don't we? So data conversion. I think you've done some on data conversions, haven't you, Ben?
Yeah, I have. But I think this map tells it perfectly. Yeah, so I guess there's a really good example actually. We were working with an asset management firm that were managing like hundreds of thousands of properties that were going through kind of litigation, and then they had 9 different receivers. So kind of people, insolvency practitioners that were dealing with the sale of these assets. They were all dealing with it in Excel as people do. They were all sending it into the centralized team, who were then consolidating it all to give kind of a finalized view to the board. The problem is the way you write the date, to my point earlier, versus the way I write a date is incredibly different, right? It's not standardized, and none of them would really subscribe to a standardized Excel. That they'd write over it, they'd change the cell formatting. So what we did was we created an RPA that would pull together all of these documents, but built in a mapping at the back for it to reference. So let's say you were at the date 1/1/2000, it would know that was the 1st of January. And it kind of had a frame of reference, but it was only for the 80%, which wasn't actually that many different variations. And what we had by the end was a document with 85,000 data points on it, and only 850 of them were unknown variables. But before that, every one of them was unknown. So it reduced the handling time by 95%, which freed them up to do like really value-adding stuff. As you can imagine, the process was quite complex. And it freed them up to actually review the data in a more succinct way. So that's the use case that we have for data conversion.
Cool.
Had a lot of value.
Thanks, mate. So the last one I'll give you an example of is an outbound call one, actually. So companies still make outbound calls to people. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but they have a really, really low success rate. So, for example, at a bank that we recently worked with, this isn't for them, but they had this process where a certain type of mortgage, they would call up the customer, every customer, for this certain type, because highly regulated, and they would check that the customer understood everything and that everything was explained to them correctly, and so basically it was like a compliance check after the product had been sold, just to make sure, because it was a very conservative organization and they don't want to make mistakes and get in trouble with the regulator. So they're really quite diligent, which is great, right? But what would happen is this team would know all the ones they have to call. And before the call, they would spend half an hour reading through everything that happened on this case, because they needed to familiarize themselves with the various intricacies of the product that the customer had brought, and doing basically their homework, so they don't look like an idiot when they're on the phone call. Then they make the phone call, and they almost never get through. This team works 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and they almost never get through the client. I think it was something along the lines of 20% success rate in terms of when they pick up the phone, that 20% of the time someone answers. Now, I've just said they spent half an hour researching this case. So all that is just in the toilet, right? Because they put the phone down, they go on to the next case, which they're going to research for half an hour, make a call, can't call, put it back in and do it again. So it's total non-value added waste, lots of waste in this, and lots of failure in this process. And now one of the best things that I've seen was from a telco, actually. And it was regarding a complaint that I had because I got incorrect billing, where they overcharged me by a few £1,000s. This was a few years ago. And they wanted to speak to me about it. And so I got this text message through that said, we're going to call you at 4:00. Is that okay? And you could accept that, or you could say, no, it's not, it doesn't work. And if you accepted it, it's great. They'd just confirm who was going to call you. Michael's going to call you at 4:00 today about this. And if you just said, no, that doesn't work for me, then, a text comes back saying, okay, well, what about this time? Or, is it the time that's the problem, or is it the date? So you can respond with a 2 to change the time, or a 3 to change the date. And then the robot looks at the diary and then gives another option, and blah, blah, blah. So this is an incredibly simple but effective automation. It's really quite cheap to do, because you can buy SMSs really cheaply that you can send through the web. They're like a penny or something. They're dirt cheap. But what the effect of this has is that the customer is now expecting your call, so they're ready for it, and it gives them the power to change their mind, or to get a different option. If, like, I've got a meeting at 4:00, but I'm free at 5. Or if you can call me at 5:15, that will be ace, right? But if you call me at 4, you're going through to voicemail because I'm in a meeting. So it's a really effective automation that can really drive up productivity and strip out a lot of that waste that's inherent in outbound calls. Should you try and automate everything? If you're going into an organization, Ben, should you just like go bananas and just try and automate the lot?
I'd like to try. No, generally this is the problem, right? To my point earlier, the processes are generally driven by the people, and as part of that process, generally bad habits are kind of picked up. So there'll be lots of additions to process, and it won't be intentional, right? It'll just be waste. So the first thing you should do really when you're kind of looking through a process before you move to automate is to look to what is the value stream steps. So what are all the necessary steps that we actually need to take, and take out all the ones that are in there that aren't really that vital to the end product being delivered. And then once you've gone through that and you've removed all the waste, or as much of it as you can, some of it you can't, it's necessary, you need to keep it in there. You look to try and optimize it. So is there a lot of rework happening? So I guess to the case study you've just been over there, constantly calling someone that there's an optimized way of changing that process and making it better so it's more successful. You don't need to keep going back to it. And then because processes are generally driven by humans, there's lots of variations, and there's many ways to skin a cat, they say. But in reality, there's only one best way of doing it. There's the best way of doing it. And that's what you want to do, right? You want to make it the best process it can be and make sure everybody follows that by like a standardized model. Thank you. And then when you've got that, the best way of working, you can then look to integrate automation. And I suppose that the key thing for me is don't just automate the parts that the client doesn't like. People will always want to automate stuff that's challenging because they don't like doing it. But the parts that are good at automation is the parts that are just humdrum, mundane, the same. Those are where the value can be in RPA, not in we don't really know how to tackle this part of the process, so you just go away and automate that.
Brilliant. So, I mean, we call that the Rosa model, and I think certainly about a year ago, UiPath had this big marketing campaign, and it was called Automate First. And I remember it because it's not because it's just very memorable, but because it's wrong. Like, honestly, we automate last because processes are often they're terrible. And I think if you have a bad process that delivers a bad customer experience and you automate that, there's a really strong chance it's still going to be a bad process and a bad customer experience. It's just now cheaper to operate or faster to operate. So we would always advocate trying to make it easier. And some of these things, if you don't do these things, you could be automating unnecessary things. So in other words, you're spending more money automating something that didn't need to happen because it just didn't need to happen. You could have removed that step from the process. Checking is a good one. We found if you were automating some checking, but didn't understand the purpose of what was being checked and whether or not that was required, then you've just spent a whole bunch of time and money automating something that wasn't needed. And we have loads of examples of that occurring in business. My advice would be to automate last. Cam, is there any other kind of pitfalls or gotchas or issues when it comes to RPA or things people should look out for?
And I think I've taken a couple of looks at the Q&A. I think someone actually asked about this. When automating with like third-party systems, so you saw me automate with MarketWatch.com, we don't own that website and we have no control over what's going to happen to it. And sometimes people don't understand that risk. So
MarketWatch, the MarketWatch people tomorrow could release a brand new version of the website where everything is changed and the whole look and feel is different and the names of what everything's called is changed. What would that do to your automation?
So it would most likely break it. There are some. So when we're using the selectors, it does give us a bit of security. So we're not saying go to this specific pixel on your screen and click it because that would.
As long as they called it the same name, but if they renamed it to something, it was BG-quote, wasn't it? And if they called it something else, if they just changed it to just quote, your automation wouldn't pick that up anymore, would it?
Yeah. So you'd have to redevelop for that, and that's kind of similar to another thing. So if there is a system that you do own, and say it's going to get an upgrade in, let's say, 3 months, there's no point putting in all the hard work now to automate it. You might as well just wait 3 months to save you automating it twice.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So one of the things that we always call out with clients is that if you're creating an RPA practice in your organization, you need to be very well integrated into the IT work stack, so that you're on the comms when a system is being an enhancement or an update is being released to an application. You need to know about that in advance so that you can have a look at what systems are affected and kind of go, well, yeah, we use that system for 5 different automations. Okay, cool. So now can I see what you're changing? And then you can look at what's being changed and make a decision then that says, yeah, that doesn't affect any of my processes. I'm gold. Or you might go, actually, 3 of those 5 processes use those very things that are being changed. So then if you know what's being changed and how it's going to look before it goes live, you can make that change to your automation so that when the release goes live on this application, you can go live with your revised automation and everything just keeps working. So I've just articulated how it should work. Do you think it works like that anywhere?
Fortunately not.
I've yet to see it. I'm sure there is like an exemplar organization somewhere that has got that down to a fine art. I haven't found them. We tell people this, but they still get caught unawares. But thankfully, with repairing an automation that's knocked over is usually quite a fast process, isn't it? Because it's not the whole thing hasn't collapsed. It's just the bits that changed no longer work. So you just need to zero in pretty quickly on what bits have changed and then update your automation so it works, right?
Yeah, I guess Cam and I have just rolled off a project and the client wanted to use kind of end-to-end RPA, but when Cam and I did this discovery, it was quite apparent that one of the systems they were using, they didn't own. It was subject to quite a lot of change. You know, every month or so it would change. Fundamentally, it was quite iterative. So the solution we went forward with was to use an API to pull that information in and use Python. So it's different. But I guess the point that Cam was making and you were making was that RPA isn't a silver bullet to all of the problems, and you should use it where necessary. But sometimes there's other better technology available.
Yeah, I love that. So I think it's all about using the right tool for the job. And I've spoken to a lot of IT directors about RPA, and they tend to fall into 2 distinct camps. One, which is, yeah, I love it. I think it's great. And the other, which is, this is an abomination. I don't want it anywhere near my beautiful, elegant IT infrastructure and architecture. Be gone with you, vile sir. Apparently, they're kind of old English. But that's really polarizing. And we would never say that RPA is going to be the solution for all your problems, because it's not. Oftentimes there's going to be better ways to achieve the outcome you're looking for. But equally, there are going to be times when RPA is the perfect answer to your problem. And it's about finding those. And most organizations of a certain size are going to find, in fact, I'd say most organizations. I mean, even if you're a very small company with a dozen staff, you could download the community edition of UiPath and someone could learn. If they're pretty good at Excel, they can go through the online training UiPath offers and build something like Cam just did. And you can chip away at some of these time-consuming tasks and make your organization more effective. Of course, on larger organizations, that scales up, right? And the benefits can be a lot larger. Right, we've got 15 minutes left, so I thought what we might do now is have a chat, have a look at the Q&A and see if we've answered any questions or see if there's anything we need to answer. And then we'll wrap up. So thanks to those people who've asked some questions. The first one I've got is of the 3 tools, which one has the better ecosystem or support system? Cam?
So, as we said earlier, in terms of support system, UiPath I think definitely wins in the online community. I've sent a few questions to the online forum, and you get an answer within the day.
And it's a good answer usually. It solves your problem.
Yeah, and if not, they're normally asking for more information so they can answer it properly and well. In terms of dealing directly with the company, I don't think I've actually worked directly with Automation Anywhere, but UiPath and Blue Prism.
The company Automation Anywhere, because you've used Automation Anywhere as the software, but you haven't had to deal with the company that owns it. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So dealing with them, getting on a conference call to troubleshoot a problem. Both of them have actually been pretty good. I'd recommend both of them. And I think a colleague of mine or colleague of ours has been on calls with Automation Anywhere, and I think they solved the problem for them. So I think in terms of online support or over the phone directly from the company, I think all of them are good. I don't think you can do too much.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Cam. We've got a terrific question here. I'm not sure we will have the answer to hand, but we'll have a crack. Does any solution from the big three, so UiPath, Blue Prism, and Automation Anywhere, do any of them allow MacBook installation or have a product for Macs? And I know UiPath needs to install on a Windows machine, but is AA web-based, or does AA allow you to do it on a Mac? I'm not sure we've had that come up, because most companies we work with run on Windows infrastructure, don't they? So it's very rare that you see a large Mac rollout in sort of the organizations we deal with. Do you guys know the answer to that?
I don't.
Good question.
Yeah.
Cam?
No.
No, neither. I tell you what, great question. I love it. I'm going to find out the answer and we'll include it. So what we're going to do is we're going to send out a thank you for attending the webinar, along with a link to the video in case that you weren't able to. So everyone that registered, if in case you weren't able to attend, you'll be able to watch this. I don't know why I'm saying that, because if you're not attending, you're not hearing me say that right now. Never mind. Or maybe it was just so good that you are here watching it and you want to watch it again and again. And of course, why wouldn't you? So you'll be able to do that as well. We'll post it on YouTube. Or if you want to be able to share it to some of your colleagues, you'll be able to share the YouTube link as well. On that email, we'll include the answer to that question once we find out what it is. But yeah, good question. Does it work on Mac? I mean, I've got UiPath. I'm on a Mac right now. So this is a Mac, which I can't turn around and show you because it's camera's on the Mac. But I run UiPath on this, but I cheat. I use Parallels, which is a virtual Windows environment, and then I run UiPath on that. So you can do it. If you use Parallels to create like a virtual Windows environment, then it absolutely runs fine. And I know that for a fact because that's exactly how I do it on here. But does it run natively in Mac? I'm not sure. I'll find out. Another question. Could you tell the use of RPA in insurance industry, and especially in claims?
Do you mind if I take this one?
Yeah, go for it, Ben.
Yeah, cool. I guess in any use case, it's horses for courses. What's right for one might not be right for another. For example, if you've got a really solid infrastructure with an end-to-end application, you wouldn't want to take it out of there and use RPA. But I will give you an example of where we have used it. So there was like an input portal from a system, which was like a web application, where it would send and then the CSV file, which is like Excel, would download, and a team would use that to run through. The problem is there would be 150 columns with a data point in each, and from a user perspective, it's pretty ugly to look at. So what we did was we created a template, like a one-page template with everything that they'd need to know about this person and their circumstances, and we took all of those line items and put them into boxes. Some of them had formulas in them, etc. And it gave like the end user the opportunity to read and absorb all that information a lot more clearly and be able to make a much more informed decision. So that was one case that we've used it for. But it depends on the circumstance, I suppose.
Yeah. So we did another one for an insurance broker actually, and they had an internal system that they would use to get a quote. And their customers would just email them through, can I have a quote for, a fleet of 10 vehicles for insurance? This is where we're based, blah, blah, blah. So what we did was we gave them a standardized form that they could give out to their clients, their customers, which they'd put the request on. And then because this wasn't a client-facing software that they got their quotes, was an internal one, we use the robot then to take all those inputs, plug it in, and then generate a quote, and then format that really nicely, and then send that back out to the client. So we've used it to generate quotes in insurance, and we've also used it to help run claims. So there's things that you can check on a claim, particularly if it's a digital claim. So the data is digital. You can check certain things that you want to check are there or are correct or are the right value, or are inside the terms of what is covered by the insurance. And you can automatically reject stuff that aren't, or things that don't match. So if they were claiming for £2,000, but the information came back saying it was £1,200, you could kick that out as an exception and say don't approve it because they're asking for more than the evidence supports. So again, it depends on your inputs. Some insurance firms still have a lot of paper that comes in. And okay, they might scan it and turn it into digital, but it's not really digital data. It's just a scanned bit of paper. It's just an image. It's very difficult to read. You can use OCR, optical character recognition, but that's not always great as well, especially if it's handwritten. So you absolutely can use RPA in claims. I'd be surprised if there weren't some use cases that we could immediately have a look at if we looked at your claims environment. I hope that answers your question. Next one from Ian asked about the stock example, reading an external website. So I think we've answered this. Is UI path process dependent on that source not changing? It absolutely is. So again, if they gave that website just a look and feel change, but the names of everything was in the background remained the same, our process would happily keep going, even if the stock price is now written in the top right corner instead of the bottom left. Our automation wouldn't care less. If they change the name of that, though, that's a different story. Gary's asked, how do you use RPA principles in chatbot technology for transactional process so it's less clunky? Yeah, so that's a really good question, actually. Chatbots are, in fact, AI, or they should be. They're machine learning. The idea of a chatbot is that it learns from the questions that it's asked, and it learns what the correct response is. And the best chatbots are ones that have been trained with a lot of data, so that they've got a really good understanding of what it is you're trying to ask. And they use things like NLP, which is natural language processing engines, to try and figure out what it is you're trying to say. Some chatbots, though, are not built that way, and they're built kind of stupid, and they don't really do much. And they if you don't ask one of about 3 questions, then I can't help you, kind of thing. And they're pretty crappy implementations. The best way it can work with a chatbot is actually to do the doing. So if you were having a secure conversation, say, with a customer over a chatbot for a bank, let's say, and the chatbot was going, well, I want to authenticate you. So can you tell me your username and give me the first letter of your password and the 6th letter and the 7th character? And then the chatbot can't do anything with that information, but it can hand it off to a bot, which can then key that into the system and then return a result saying, yeah, authenticated. And then you could ask that bot, what's my current balance? And the bot can then, the chatbot can then hand off to RPA to go and get an account balance, follow the account balance process, get that data, and the chatbot can then tell the customer what it is. So it can really be the doing element of a chatbot. So the chatbot does the thinking and talking bit, and you can hand off to an RPA bot to do the doing. That's the best practice I've seen from a chatbot perspective. Thanks, Gary. Ben has asked, could you talk about the analytics you see on process performance once RPA has been installed? Yeah, sure. Cam, do you want to tell us about what you can report on?
Yeah, so all of the three platforms that we've kind of talked about today all have some kind of in a repository which all of the data gets fed back to. So Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere, I think, is called the control room. The UI path is called Orchestrator. And then all three of those kind of in applications have a reporting element to it. So you can record like the average time for each transaction, like depending on the process. You can look at like how many bots you have and how much time like it has left in its day. So we've been talking about automations, but actually if you buy a bot, that one bot can run all of your processes. It just needs to have enough time in the day to do so. So you can look at its capacity from a day-to-day point of view as well.
You can also see where on a process where the failures are occurring or where the errors are. So if you've got like a large volume of processes and it's constantly having a problem here or there's constantly errors here, you can get really good analytics out to say that actually that step in the process doesn't work, isn't great. Yeah. There's a lot of failure demand in there. We get a lot of junk data about that thing. So maybe we need to look at where we request that data or how we request that data and fix at the root cause. So then when it comes to RPA, we can reduce the amount of errors that are occurring at that point. You get really granular analytics on exactly how long it took. I mean, one of the things that you can even get out of it is latency. You can start to come back and say, look, this system is really slow. Actually, I've got data to prove it. I can tell you exactly how long it took for that system to load for 10,000 attempts or 10,000, processes that were executed. So you get a lot of really rich data, very granular data as well. I think that's it for the Q&A, but I'm just looking at the chat box and there's also some questions going on there. Just going back to the bot, where do you integrate the orchestrator in the process so that the bot from a user, for example, a Telegram bot? I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I think, are we talking about if it's working with a chat bot, I think you'd have to have a bot assigned, a RPA bot assigned to the chat bot, or a group of them assigned to chat bots so that, and running live, waiting for a request. So the chat bot would go, the customer has asked me for an account balance. Well, the customer has asked me to authenticate them. So then I need to kick off the authenticator process on one of the bots, which is going to get the information that I asked for and plug it into here and then tell me that they are the customer, they've passed security. Or if it's an account balance, that's what they've asked for and this is the account they've asked it for. I need to kick off that process and tell the bot that it's that account there, and then it'll go through the screens, scrape the data and give it back to me. So you would have to have a pool of bots, of RPA bots, ready to initiate, and you'd probably have to get the chatbot to initiate it. I don't think it's something you could use in Orchestrator. In Orchestrator, all you'd be doing is assigning, 10 RPA licenses to the overall chatbot process, I guess.
Yeah, Cam, I think in terms of like the technology, I don't think RPA would be the right solution for that, to the point earlier. So I've seen Telegram be used for read and receive information, such as like give me a balance. People, I've seen it used before where they used Python and then they used an API to access the information. There was no really RPA involved.
Yeah, I've not seen Telegram, so yeah, if that's the case, then APIs and some Python scripts, might be the better way to go.
Yeah,
cool. Let me just check the Q&A one last time. I think we've answered all the questions. Brilliant. Well, that takes us right up to the end of the webinar. So thanks for those who are still here and hanging on. I hope you found that a really interesting introduction to RPA. If you have any questions, feel free to give us an email. You'll be able to respond to the one we send out. But I'd like to thank Ben and Cam for joining me today, and thanks to all of you. So cheers, everybody.